beautiful theme. All right, the listening examples that you need to identify are this first movement and the last movement of the work. But we're going to listen to the interior of the movements, portions of them, so you can hear the returning cyclic idea of that violin A theme. So the second movement of the work is in D minor. It's in a scherzo-like quality. It's very, very dramatic. So Sonata Allegro first, or excuse me, Sonatina first movement. So it has this scherzo dramatic element. It's very virtuosic. And in the opening, at the end of the opening section, it has the cyclic return. Of the first movement, violin theme. Okay, so let's listen to a little bit. Well, I'll stop it after we hear the return of the opening movement theme. And it's transformed. I mean, so it's going to be presented very quick. But you hear that interval, the third basic shape of the melody. Contrast to the first movement, the little lyrical first movement. All right, third movement, Franck writes, this title, a recitative fantasy. And so we talked about a recitative, but just to review that was a type of passage that originated in opera. And so it is declamatory, so very speech-like. In opera, the recitative is the expression of the action, of the drama of that particular scene. And so the character would express, what was transpiring, and then it would be immediately followed by an aria, which was then the character's emotional response to that action. And so the aria would be very melismatic, so that just means several notes per syllable. The recitative, on the other hand, was one note per syllable, so it has this idea of expressing something very, very clearly. It also had a very sparse accompaniment, or no accompaniment at all. So that's the second thing to write. And so in an instrumental setting like this, which obviously doesn't have a vocal part, the term recitative will refer to a passage which is just a single line melody. And so you just have this monophonic expression. And the term fantasy just refers to the idea of something that doesn't follow a strict form. Instead, it is intuitive by nature. And so think of it as emphasizing the imagination. And so we'll put here this improvisatory element is present in a fantasy. So it's intuitive instead of being following, a preconceived structure. All right, so we're going to listen to a little bit of this. This is the slow movement, and this starts out with just a little introduction on the piano, and then the violin comes in with this recitative passage. At the end of the movement, toward the end of the movement, the theme is presented, which also will return in the last movement. So you're going to have a couple of themes in the last movement that are brought back from earlier movements. So, and this is a very dramatic theme at the end of this movement. So all, the movements are all interconnected with these, shared themes. Let's see if I can find this movement on here. Here's the recitative passage for the violin. Now the piano comes back in with the 8th theme from the first movement. So you can hear it real clearly there, the 8th theme. And here it is again. This movement is about 8 minutes long, something like that. And I'm going to go to the end of it so you can hear this theme that's going to come back in the last movement. So this is like the last minute of the slow movement. Based on the A theme. So that's from the first movement. So, in the last movement, then, what we're going to have is a contrapuntal beginning. All right, and if you'll pass those scores across, I'll trade you with you. All right, so what happens at the beginning of this is that the piano presents a theme in the top voice of its part that has some accompanying harmonies beneath it. It's also doubled in tenor. And overall, this fourth movement is a compound ternary. And what compound ternary means is that overall it's an ABA form. But it has within each of the sections then various parts. And so I'm going to go through these parts and see how it all kind of relates. But this is an opening theme that is repeated one measure later and an octave higher in the violin. And so when you have that situation of a leader and a follower, that's an example of a canon. So this starts out like an accompanied canon. So this opening part one, and what I'll do, let's just do it like this. So this is the opening A section. So a canon, as you know, has that relationship between two or more voices, that one is serving as the leader, and that term dux designates the leader. C-O-M-E-S, the follower. So if you look at the way this begins, and you just start comparing the violin to what the piano had to measure earlier, how long does it duplicate exactly that melody? Can you start looking through it? So you're always comparing the violin with a measure earlier in the piano right hand. So how about the first page? Can you tell? So pretty much it's following exactly. Turn to the second page. And it continues to do this all the way to the end of the violin part until you get to letter A. And so that is the first part, is this accompanied canon with the violin duplicating the piano measure later. Then when you get to letter A, you have a second part. The second part then features continuous eighth notes in the violin, and then you have a very lyrical, slower moving theme that's presented in the soprano, the right hand of the piano. And so you have that through that page, you go to the next page, and this then leads to a section that is part 3, that is when the violin comes in with this opening theme that the piano had presented originally. Now, in part 3, the violin is the leader. So we'll put here for part 2, violin has continuous eighth notes. And the piano has a lyrical theme. Then this part 3 is in C sharp major here, and the violin is the leader, and the piano follows. And the way that you describe a canon has to do with the interval